Welcome to Smart ADHD Bite-Size, where we distill a previous episode down to around 5 minutes, giving you the key takeaways in a quick and easy to digest format. Today's Bite-Size is from episode 18, The Beginner's Guide to the Neuroscience of ADHD with Jonathan Hassall. Let's dive in. Number 1, we're not broken, just inconsistent.
I don't think of it as a major structural difference because we know that our brains can perform in the same way as anyone else's brain. I always like to say to people, we're not broken, we're just inconsistent. So it's not that we can't focus, it's not that we can't direct emotion, it's not that we can't organize working memory. It's just that it doesn't happen reliably.
Jonathan explains that people with ADHD are not fundamentally broken or lacking, but rather inconsistent in functions like focus and emotional regulation. The key challenge with ADHD is not that we can't perform tasks, but it's that we perform them inconsistently. This is so important. Instead of feeling like our brains are broken, it's actually inconsistency which is the issue. We can focus, we can be organized, it's just that these aren't always reliable. So there is definitely hope here. Number 2, dopamine, the brain's universal communicator.
It's everywhere where there is nervous tissue in the body, and it's more appropriate to think of it as a universal communicator. Passing signals, that's its job. We have brain cells that come down to receptors. This neat little system that instead of being permanently wired to each other, we pass on the electrical signal that re-triggers the electrical stimulation, which means we can have one cell talking to hundreds of others, which is why our brain can do the amazing things it does. Yes, dopamine is very much affected in terms of stimulation. It's certainly very much present in terms of the reward centers of the brain.
Dopamine plays a crucial role in how our brain passes signals between cells. It's not just about motivation, it's the brain's messenger system. This is what allows our brain to do incredible things like focus, learn, and make decisions. And I think it's fascinating that dopamine is in every cell in our body as well as in our brains. ADHD affects so many areas in our lives. And elsewhere in the episode, Jonathan mentioned that it's not that we don't have enough dopamine.
We think we have more reuptake receptors than other people do. Their job is to reabsorb dopamine. And we think that people with ADHD have too many of them.
And so the amount of dopamine we need for the number of receptors is a lot more. Number 3, the struggle to shift from default to focus mode.
If I need access to dopamine to turn on my attention and I know I don't have it, then it's going to be hard to shift from default mode to task positive. There have been some fMRI studies done where they've shown that as the task positive network activates, the default mode network doesn't turn down like it should. So the task positive isn't as robust in its activation. So our attention is not turning on as strongly as it could. But at the same time, our default mode is staying fired up, which the suggestion from that research was it might be why we remain so distractible when we're focusing on things.
Jonathan talks about how ADHD brains often struggle to switch from default mode, that's daydreaming, or the DMN, default mode network, to task positive mode, that's focused work. With ADHD, even when we try to focus, the brain's default mode stays active, making us easily distracted. And for me, understanding the difference between the task positive network and the default mode network has really helped me understand how my brain, my ADHD brain, differs. And the idea that we find it difficult to switch from focus mode even when we're trying to concentrate. It's not about willpower, it's just that our neurologies are different. Number 4, anxiety and ADHD. A constant fight or flight state.
What we're doing in that state is getting an adrenaline hit. It's usually heavily attached to anxiety. Anxiety is prolific amongst people with ADHD. Very commonly, people aren't aware that what they've been experiencing is anxiety. It's a very useful system. Every neurological system is useful, right? But the problem with ADHD is that we can find ourselves pushed into that space too often because we get there when we feel out of control, which if you have an inconsistent dopamine availability, you are going to feel out of control because you're not self-regulating effectively.
Jonathan discusses how people with ADHD often experience heightened anxiety. This is linked to our fight or flight response being triggered more frequently. That's our sympathetic nervous system, because we feel out of control. When dopamine is inconsistent, it's hard to self-regulate, leading to even more anxiety. Now, for me, this was a light bulb moment. I've often felt that constant anxiety, not realizing that actually it's part of my ADHD experience. It's a reminder to work on strategies to regulate dopamine and manage anxiety. And finally, number 5, turning functional biases into superpowers.
We want to get ourselves to a point where we achieve our intentions reliably. Our intentions invariably are the right thing to be following, and they're the measure of who we are. We can learn to self-regulate more effectively. So those biases, some people call them superpowers. I prefer to think of them as functional biases. We can use them to our advantage instead of our detriment.
Jonathan encourages us to see our ADHD traits as functional biases rather than flaws. While they can be challenging with self-regulation, we can use these biases to our advantage and tap into our full potential. This is such an empowering message. Instead of seeing ADHD as something that holds us back, yes, it can do, but we can view it as a set of unique tools. Once we learn how to use them, they can become assets. I don't want to sugarcoat this. There were definite struggles for those of us with ADHD, and that's what this podcast is all about. That's the end of this bite-sized episode. We'll see you in the next episode.